So that's, and the way, and in terms of tax burdens, we were the third lowest tax burden country in the world after Qatar and Hong Kong. So that really shows you where we went and how we went there. And I think the main thing was that we really had this situation when we had to believe in what we were doing. You know, it was really a hopeless situation. We recruited young people. And I think the main recipe for it is that you bring people who believe that this is their country, that this is their commitment, this is their future, this is their children. There are no blueprints by which you can say, okay, that's how we do it, and it happens. No, you have conviction. And of course, we changed things. We had hundreds of regulations. We had all kinds of agencies that were not doing anything, except, you know, pocketing bribes. And, you know, we slashed lots of agencies. We took big scissors and we cut 90% of regulations. Suddenly, we had no sanitary inspection in Georgia. So you would think, without sanitary inspection, they were telling us people will get poisoned en masse. Restaurants will poison people. But which owner of the restaurant wants to poison its customers or patrons? It's obvious that they were, instead of expanding their business, they were paying money to sanitary inspectors. Or which business owner wants to catch fire, right? And we had a number of fire inspectors that were going around every business every month. So we had, and you know, we are a 5 million people country. So I have my fear. In 5 million people country, it's still possible to do reforms. In 1 million, impossible. Ideal size is maybe your size, size of state of Lagos, and I will explain you why. Because if you're 5 million, we have fired 100,000 people in the capital. Now look, these people, we didn't send them to labor camps. They still live in downtown. They still enjoy life. So they still have nice houses, nice cars. Every time they had to have protest rallies against my presidency, they could walk or drive on their nice cars to the presidency and express their hatred for what I did to them. So it's a hard thing, you know, like, because and then you change the mentality, because we cut all these regulations and agencies, and these people live next to you. You know, that guy who lived next to in the same stairwell as, like, say, for my family of my mother, he was head of some agency. He wasn't going to his work. I would, in all my childhood, watch him playing chess and backgammon in our yard. But he would get every month his money for what was his agency so-called was doing or stopping the others to do. Customs. We fired the entire customs service. And we changed the philosophy of customs, because the way it is, you know, I remember my friend, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan came to see me. I told him, look, we have these new big terminals, and to pass through it, every truck takes 7 minutes. If it's more than 7 minutes, it's already a problem. If it's more than 1 hour, the entire ship gets fired. He looked at me a little bit, you know, he wants to change, he did lots of change in Turkey. He said, but where do you find such customs officers who would work for such harsh conditions, right? I said, come, I'll show you. So I took to them, and there are these young boys and girls sitting and smiling, and some of them speak Turkish, English, you know, all kind of other foreign languages. And they smiled there, and they said, look at them. The problem, Recep, is that these big guys are not customs officers. We took them from model agencies. They are basically young models. Everything else is done by computers. It's software. Software, software doesn't want to lie or cheat, right? And if you give discretion to somebody who calls himself or herself customs officer, then you have a trouble. So software knows exact codes and knows what cargoes goes, and it's very easy to do that. It's just a matter of political will. And for the same token, one of the main things we did is decentralization in terms of course, we are a small country, but very diversified. And the biggest construction boom we experienced was in an autonomous region called Ajara, because we gave all the powers to local government to do it. And they really did it with their heart. Even in a small country, when you have central government taking every small decision, this is usually a break for major progress. Because bureaucrats are there to stop things, not to promote it. Because if you are a much bigger country and you are a federal country, but you know, from my experience, if you are central government and you see, oh, there is this rising governor there who does nice things, and you are, say, for instance, prime minister. We had good prime ministers, but all of them are human, right? So they say, okay, this rising governor might want my job in 2 years if he's very successful. So there is this issue with jealousy which they experience. And there are lots of other issues, and usually people know locally much better in any democracy what is better for them, and they're closer to people who do it because they can control them more. So from that standpoint, we really had change. And for a small country, change also expresses itself in benchmarks. World Bank, for all 9 years of my presidency, every year they have this thing, index, proclaimed Georgia as world's #1 reformer, which meant that that year no other country made more progress in terms of making things easy for the economy than as Georgia in the world. We were number 137 or World Bank Index of Ease of Doing Business. At the beginning of my presidency, we went down to up to number 8, which is to say we were the first developing country ever to enter top 10 of World Bank Index. We did, what we changed also, we did perception of public service. We did one space, one window thing. We did public service halls. These are the places, the most beautiful buildings we built, commissioned lots of world architectures, and then lots of younger Georgians caught up. They are big glass buildings. By the way, all the new buildings we were built of glass so that they could be seen transparently. Police buildings, judge court buildings, and these buildings. And if you look at these buildings, like the biggest one in our capital, it's like big shopping mall for government services. Every day, 45,000 plus people go there. And it's one principle. Everybody looks at each other. It's all glass. There are no lines. And you go there to pay taxes, to register property, to even get your school certificate. Now, Georgia has world's fastest registration of property, according to FC, world's fastest registration of companies, world's fastest customs procedure, world's fastest ID issuance. And so these procedures are all done in this one hall. And it's very easy to do things. Because you go there, you want to do, say, build a restaurant, it takes a few minutes to get permission. You want to sell or buy, a few minutes. Georgia has become, we have lots of industries. We managed to have, we started from agriculture industry, and we are even building jets. But you know what became Georgia's biggest export? We became the biggest re-exporter of cars, which is to say we export cars. We don't produce cars. But the reason is that in Georgia, to buy and sell cars, it's 3 to 4 minutes. And everybody from the region comes there to do it. So the idea was that we don't have oil and gas like all our neighbors, but we had almost all our neighbors, but we have something that they don't have. We have no red tape. We have no corruption, because in corruption, we were top. And in Europe, according to European Union, we were least corrupt economy in Europe last 3 years of my presidency. And on crime rate, we were the highest crime rate in Europe. In fact, 80% of organized crime bosses all over former Soviet states come from Georgia. We have this dubious privilege. But Georgia is the safest country of Europe, safer than Iceland. Which is an island, obviously. So that tells you the story that, when you kill corruption, say in police service, in other service, when you make these things transparent, by the way, when you bring energy to the country, because Russia stopped our exports to their market, the only thing we were exporting all these years to Russia, the last several years, was electricity, because Russia needed it and we had actually surplus of it suddenly. And we lit up streets, and we put cameras everywhere. Another thing when you resist criminality, because if all the streets are lit and if you have cameras everywhere, it's very easy to control. And poverty rates. We had 52% of Georgians lived on less than $2 a day at the beginning. Now it's less than 18%. Well, it's still a high percentage, but it's big progress for all these years. And we also did, so when I'm saying what we do, what is our impact, going back to what I said, we don't have oil and gas, but we have no crime, no red tape. We basically have no corruption, or almost no corruption, because if you look at the dates on opinion polls, 96% of Georgians said in 2004, that's to say at the beginning of my government, that they interact with corruption, 96%. In 2012, in the same polls done by Gallup, it was less than 2%. And when I asked what these 2% were, by the way, because I was always interested, people mostly said medical doctors. And then again, we had to change that system, and we had to build 150 new hospitals and entirely move to private insurance system funded by the government, obviously. So having said that, that brings even development. And the idea is that the way how Georgia's growth was developing all these years, despite all these instabilities I explained, was that FDI was coming because it was easy to do business. It was a nice place to be in. When I became president, we had 100,000 tourists a year. When I finished my presidency, we had 6 million. And besides, we have a nice country. We have 6 climatic zones, and starting from this desert, and you can ski and swim at the same time 7 months a year. But there are other things we did. For instance, we annihilated visas for basically almost all countries. You know, we had war with Russia. So obviously Russia, we had no diplomatic relations, and Russia wanted to destroy our statehood. Russian president personally promised to get me killed. One of very few promises here, bad promises he still couldn't deliver for all these years. But in 2009, 1 year after the war, I initiated abolishing visa regime with Russia unilaterally. And the reason I did it was that people were saying it's crazy, it's against our security. I said it's exactly for our security. Because more of them we can bring to our country and show that we are a normal country that without having oil and gas still has people are smiling at the streets, police is not harassing you, it's a fast developing country, more they will be compelled to tell their government not to continue with adventures toward this small but very promising and progressive country. And it's exactly the effect we reached, because after 2 or 3 years, I mean, then President Medvedev said, in his public speech to Russian parliament, he said, well, I really hate this Saakashvili guy, but by the way, we have to learn from what they did in terms of reforms and apply them in Russia.